The North Carolina National Guard has been serving our state since the 1600s. Major General Greg Lusk is the 40th Adjunct General of North Carolina. General, talk about the history of this group of soldiers and airmen.
The North Carolina National Guard and the National Guard at large has been such an integral part of our nation's founding. It actually predates the founding of our republic, long before the Declaration of Independence was ever signed. And for many years we used to have kind of what we call maybe a neighborhood watch program, if you will. Those militiamen that would, come to the aid of neighbors and communities, back in the beginning, to now a time where we're an integral part of our Army and our Air Force and part of the joint force of our nation. So we, all of us that are serving in the National Guard today, we stand in a very long line of militiamen and guardsmen that have come before us, and we stand on their shoulders today. And if we get to continue the service that they started, perhaps, hopefully, being as respectful and as professional and as proficient as they were in their time, as we answer our nation's needs, both here at the state and also across the nation.
That transition from militia title to the Guard was World War I believe, correct?
That's right. Yeah, it was early 1900s. And of course, the term militia is something that you'll find, embedded throughout our Constitution and several of the articles. And again, it's one of those foundational elements of our Constitution. If you think back in the days when our founding fathers and all those that came before were really concerned about tyranny or perhaps overreach of a federal government and the ability to have a militia, not only for that community watch program, but also those that could perhaps prevent that overreach or defend the state against the federal government back in those days. That's probably what gave rise to that being, in the Constitution as the militia. But as you said, in the early 1900s, we really kind of embarked upon a new period where it's one of these very few shining examples where the federal government and the state governments now cooperate, in the case of the National Guard. So we are the non-federalized portion of our military, and when we're not in federal service to our nation, then we report to our commanders-in-chiefs, which are the respective governors of all 50 states, the territories of Guam and Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, as well as the District of Columbia, so 54 different commanders-in-chiefs, if you will. But because of that law written in the early 1900s that kind of federalized, the federal government decided that they would provide the money and the resources for training and equipping the National Guard, with the expectation that, of course, as the federal government needs us during times of national emergency, they could call upon us as the reserves.
One great shining moment in our history side of things, I believe it was World War I or World War II, the Old Hickory units. World War I had a lot of excitement, a lot of work they did that was successful.
Sure did. And if you don't mind, I'll just point to this patch here a little bit about the history. So, on the left side, the unit designation. So this is the patch of the Hornet's Nest. And if you go back to the Revolutionary War and you think about the time that General Cornwallis had brought the British forces down to Charleston in order to come up from the south, perhaps to split the other colonies, to raise an army of loyalists, if you will, when he thought that he would walk into Charlotte's town back in the days, thought that he would be welcomed as a hero, but in turn, he ran into a hornet's nest. The mountain men met him at Kings Mountain and places like that. So a little bit of history there. Now, Old Hickory, because you're talking about the 30th Infantry Division, named after President Andrew Jackson. He was a guy that's claimed equally by South Carolina, Tennessee, and North Carolina as one of their favorite sons, and of course, President of the United States. When it came to World War I, and now probably the first or the largest growth or expansion of our military for an overseas war. Remember, the first time we've actually gone overseas at this point for the Allied Expeditionary Forces. It was just a perfect name to cobble together South Carolina, Tennessee, and North Carolina troops to make them part of the 30th Division. And as you said, exciting times, seminal parts in each one of those war efforts, World War I and II. World War I, 12 Medal of Honor recipients and cracking the Hindenburg Line, which brought World War I to a close. And then likewise in World War II, another 6 Medal of Honor recipients for the Old Hickory Division. And between Mortain, France, and cracking the Siegfried Line now, entrance into Germany itself, into the motherland, really kind of hastened bringing World War II to a merciful conclusion as well.
It's a great history, and we'll talk a little bit more here later about where we're at present day.